the sea that existed at the time, launching the October 7th massacre, the deadliest day of Jew killing since the Holocaust and the worst attack on Israel in our history. Hamas's campaign of mass murder, of rape, of kidnapping, and of looting led to a just war against a vicious terror organization. For 500 days, our families have endured the unbearable anguish as their loved ones remain in captivity, held by a barbaric terrorist organization that denies them even the most basic human rights. Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar's objective was to break apart the US-Israel alliance, amongst other things. Sinwar looked at the protests on US campuses and in many other places around the world and thought he was winning. He was wrong. As the Prime Minister's visit to Washington, D.C. and the Secretary of State Marco Rubio's visit yesterday testify, the US and Israel are more united, more determined, and share more precisely the same objectives in this war. Freeing all of our hostages, eliminating Hamas's military and governing capabilities, and ensuring that Hamas will never again constitute a threat to Israel. For 500 days, Israel has stood resolute. Israel's achievements in this war are tremendous. Hamas has been massively degraded. 20,000 terrorists eliminated, 90% of their rocket capability destroyed. Hezbollah's leadership wiped out, its strategic capability severely weakened. Iran exposed, its missile defenses shattered, and its long-range missile production set back. All of this has led to the collapse of the Assad regime in Syria. But this, of course, has only been possible thanks to the heroism, the bravery, and the sacrifice, the heavy sacrifice of our soldiers. But Israel is reshaping the Middle East, paving the way for a more peaceful future, but we are not done yet. Israel and the US stand shoulder to shoulder against Iran's aggression and in defense of our shared values of freedom and security. The world must not forget, 500 days is too long. It's time for the hostages to come home. Next, let me update you on the hostage release agreement. In coordination with US Presidential Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, the Prime Minister yesterday instructed Israel's negotiations team to leave for Cairo in order to discuss the continued implementation of the first stage of the deal. Following this evening's Security Cabinet discussion, the team will receive renewed instructions for the continuation of the negotiations regarding the second stage. So there is no surprise, Israel will not allow violations of the framework by Hamas. Israel's government and the Trump administration are working in full cooperation and in full coordination. Our enemies should be in no doubt of the fact that we are working extremely closely together with no daylight between Jerusalem and Washington, D.C. 73 hostages remain captive in Gaza. The living and those murdered by Hamas. Israel's moral and ethical obligation is to get them home, and it's only matched by our determination to do everything in our power to get them home, every last one of them. As part of the first stage of the framework, 19 Israelis, 5 foreign nationals have so far been released alive, and 14 more hostages are expected to be released in this initial stage. So the question we're often asked is, why does Israel insist on the end of Hamas? I'll tell you through the reported testimony of Ohad Ben Ami. He was released a week ago, just over a week ago. This is the brutal reality of Hamas captivity. It's rarely reported, unfortunately, in the media. Mr. Ben Ami spoke about severe malnutrition and starvation. Ohad Ben Ami and other hostages were released in an emaciated state, significant body weight lost due to prolonged malnutrition. deliberately deprived of food, forced to ration scraps, and at times decide among themselves who would eat and who would go hungry. Physical and psychological torture, relentless psychological torment, and physical neglect, denied basic medical care, left untreated for infections, chronic illnesses, and injuries. Some suffered from heart disorders due to the prolonged deprivation and stress. They were imprisoned in underground tunnels for 16 months, held in Hamas's network of tunnels, cramped, dark, and suffocating, sometimes 30 meters underground, no exposure to sunlight, fresh air, or proper sanitation, leading to extreme physical deterioration. And dehumanization and isolation. Hamas stripped them of all dignity. No access to hygiene, filthy conditions, little contact with each other, treated as bargaining chips with their suffering intentionally prolonged for political leverage. And emerging from hell footage showed them pale, frail, and barely able to walk. Not just victims of captivity, but survivors of calculated, systematic cruelty by Hamas. Their condition testament to the barbarity of their captors and the urgent need to bring home those still left behind. This is the reality of Hamas rule. The world must not look away. Next, on the ceasefire with Lebanon, Israel is both committed to the ceasefire and insistent that the ceasefire agreement is fully enforced. We expect the government of Lebanon to be equally committed to their fulfillment. The Prime Minister said that the scenes we saw this weekend in Beirut of UNIFIL forces being attacked by Hezbollah were not encouraging. The two UN resolutions 1559 and 1701 must be fully implemented. Hamas must be disarmed. That is the job of the Lebanese army. But at the same time, if that is not the case, then Israel will do what it has to do to enforce the ceasefire and defend our security. Why? To thwart the risk to Israel's sovereignty and the safety of our citizens. We insist that the goal of the war, the return of our residents to their homes safely, will be made possible and fully implemented. To be clear, that means no Hezbollah between our border and the Litani River. Now, to make this point, yesterday our Air Force carried out precision intelligence-based strikes on military sites in Lebanon against Hezbollah rocket launches and weapons. Hezbollah terrorist activity at these sites is in violation of the understandings between Israel and Lebanon. Elsewhere in Lebanon, near Sidon, this morning our Air Force, using intelligence, struck and eliminated the terrorist Mohammed Shaheen. Shaheen was head of Hamas's operations department in Lebanon. He recently planned terror attacks directed and funded by Iran from Lebanese territory against our people. And Shaheen was a source of knowledge within Hamas, responsible throughout this war for terror attacks and rocket launches aimed at our civilians. Okay, so that's the end of our briefing here today. Please put your questions in the chat together with your news outlet, your name and news outlet, and we will take your questions. Okay, first question here I can see is from Natalie Melzer. Natalie, could you share with me your news outlet, please? In the meantime, they're from AP, excuse me. So Natalie Melzer from the AP, can you please respond to the publication of the tender for the expansion of the Efrat community by 1,000 housing units? This is the first major expansion since the new Trump administration. Thank you. Thank you for that question, Natalie. I haven't got a specific update on that, but I can tell you that there's always been and there always will be construction and the strengthening of the community in Efrat and the entire Gush Etzion communities, just like there is in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv and Petah Tikva. Okay, next question here is from Joel Pollack at Breitbart News. The current ceasefire deal contains a contradiction, which is that Israel claims it will still allow for the final removal of Hamas from Gaza, while Hamas claims it will allow the group to survive. Who is correct? Thank you for that question, Joel. I've shared with you our war aims. We say them every time we have one of these briefings. They are that Hamas will be destroyed and will no longer be in power on either its military or its civilian capabilities or its governing capabilities. And we will ensure, of course, that Gaza cannot be a threat, terrorist threat to Israel. And in addition, of course, we have spoken about our insistence on getting every single one of our hostages released. They must be released right now. Those are our war aims. We've said that from the very, very beginning. The Prime Minister has been extremely clear on this point. He has not wavered on that point. Many have doubted whether those achievements are achievable. Up until this day, the Prime Minister is determined, and this government is determined, and the people of Israel are united on this fact that Hamas can no longer be in control in Gaza. Okay, next question from Joel Pollack. Does the Trump administration's evident interest in some kind of deal with Iran make it more difficult to contemplate military action against the regime? Well, let me share with you our current view on Iran, because the Prime Minister has made clear over the years that Iran cannot be allowed to achieve a nuclear weapon. Now, I'm not quite sure to what you're referring to, Joel, but President Trump agrees with this in the press conferences, both in the East Room of the White House. I saw with my own eyes and I heard with my own ears that President Trump agrees with this. And of course, yesterday, Secretary of State Marco Rubio repeated the same point. So Israel supports President Trump's maximum pressure campaign. It was working, of course, before it was interrupted. And those two elements of that campaign are crippling sanctions and, secondly, a credible military threat to counter Iran's nuclear ambition. This strategy has deterred Iran until the pressure was removed. So Israel most definitely welcomes the restoration of the maximum pressure campaign. And I can tell you that President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu see very much eye to eye on the Iranian nuclear threat. These maximum pressure policies should be restored. They are being restored. And our long-standing position, which is in agreement with the US, is that Iran must never be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon, and Israel will do whatever it has to do to prevent that from happening. Okay, another question here about from Joel Pollack from Breitbart. The Trump administration has cut off all aid to South Africa, partly over its case against Israel at the ICJ. Do you see South Africa withdrawing the ICJ case? And is there any positive role South Africa can play in the region? Thank you for that question, Joel. I haven't got any particular update on this issue. I can tell you from the people of Israel's perspective, we are extremely disappointed at the way that the South African government has unfortunately fallen under the influence of Iran and of terrorist supporters and of genocide supporters. Unfortunately, this is we are extremely disappointed in this country. And the Prime Minister has made clear a robust case against the ICJ. President Trump agrees with that case, as well as against the ICC. These are trumped-up charges. These are libels against the Jewish state, the world's only Jewish state. And the Prime Minister has expressed his thanks to President Trump for President Trump's forthright approach to ensuring that this level of lawfare, this misusing the law to attack this country, cannot be allowed to prevail. Okay, a question here from Paula Bernabu from FAEFE, the Spanish media. You're hearing in the last few days that Israel intends to stick to 5 strategic points in southern Lebanon after February 18th. Could you give any more details on this? Which of these points and how long would the troops stay there, keeping the IDF presence? Thank you for that question, Paula. In this briefing, I have shared with you in a fair amount of detail our approach when it comes to Lebanon. I believe the IDF will shortly be speaking about the situation. We want the ceasefire agreement to prevail, but for that to happen, Lebanon must fulfill its role. And that means both the UN resolutions 1559 and 1701 make extremely clear there can be no Hezbollah between our border and the Litani River. We've made that crystal clear. But the specifics around the details moving forward will be released very, very shortly. And finally, last question here is from Hannah Julian at the Jewish Press. Are we going to see the release of more hostages this weekend? And if so, how many? Thank you very much for that question, Hannah. There are indeed scheduled releases this weekend, but I won't share any more details with those. Unfortunately, it is Hamas which took them hostage, Hamas which hold them hostage, and Hamas which can set them free right now. But as we've said to you, that this in this initial stage, there are initial hostages set to be released this weekend. Okay, that's the last question we have here. Thank you for joining us. We'll have another briefing again soon. In the meantime, please do contact us for interviews or for any other questions you may have, and we'll be happy to help. Please do stay safe, and we'll see you again next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.